Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is Readings with John, and I'm going to be doing a timeless reading for the collective today. I'm looking at the goal, whatever it is you need to negotiate with, advice for moving forward, and then how spirit is involved. So, with the goal, I have the Three of Wands, and this is giving me the idea that the goal is hoping that something is going to come back, right? The Three of Wands is somebody that's kind of standing on the cliff over the harbor and they're waiting for their ship to come in, proverbially. And that's not typically how I read this card. I usually see this card as more of like a strategizing kind of card or the 30,000 foot perspective. But today it distinctly feels like hoping that something's going to come back. And with whatever needs to be negotiated with being the lovers, you can see that this particular lovers card, the way that it's rendered, it's like the guy that's on the card seems a little wishy washy, right? It's giving me the sense of hoping that something comes back, but not being exactly sure if you even really want that thing. It's almost like hoping it comes back just so that you can choose whether or not you accept it or reject it, something like that. And it also reminds me of the idea of knowing what you don't want, but not exactly knowing what you want. And that's coming up strongly with the advice card being the Seven of Cups, because this whole reading has a very, like a Goldilocks kind of vibe to it, right? Where it's like feeling this out, feeling that out. Do I want this? Do I really want that? And trying to find your proverbial Goldilocks zone, right? And the advice with the Seven of Cups is kind of encouraging you to explore that. And then with the Fool on the bottom of the deck, in terms of how spirit is involved, and also behind the Fool, I have the Ace of Wands, which was the same configuration in the Sagittarius reading that I just did. And that was talking about basically following your nose wherever it goes, kind of a thing, where it's like your process is just allowing yourself to move towards things that light you up, right? If it feels good, I'm going to move towards that, right? But this thing that's coming back, it has, again, that flip-flop, wishy-washy energy where it's like there's a part of it that does or at least did feel good. And I guess the concern is whether or not it can be integrated into the now moment, right? Because the Lovers card talks about timeline merger, right? So the question might be, are the timelines still compatible, right? Like maybe at one point in history, the timelines were very compatible. They merged seamlessly, and then maybe they drifted. And now the question is, if things come back, how will it be, right? Or would it even be compatible or sustainable, right? And I pulled a couple of the note cards that I write for each of these cards. So for the Three of Wands, what came out was abandonment issues twice. So it came out on the first poll and the second poll, and distorted mirror. So distorted mirror talks to me about like a warped sense of reality, right? That it's like whatever we're projecting onto reality that's being reflected back at us is kind of warped and distorted. And again, abandonment issues coming out twice made me think, quite frankly, made me think that it's abandonment issues that might be connected to this thing that you're hoping comes back, but could be a much deeper, subtler issue. And the reason why I say that is because the cards that I pulled to clarify the lovers were Elephant Grandma, which talks to me about ancestral energy, but also memory, like deep, deep soul level memory. And then Trauma Echo at the mother level, which again talks to me about, maternal bloodline energy. The original template, and then timeline split. So the original template talks to me about, the Eden era, if you want to call it that, the golden age, when everything was peaches and cream and nobody ever had any problems and blah, blah, blah back in the day, right? And then timeline split, whatever it is that would have happened after that. So I feel like like for most of you, I think this is going to resonate as a person that you're hoping comes back. For other people, it could absolutely be an opportunity. Take it as it resonates, right? But I think the analogy of a person is just a lot easier to work with. So that is what I'm going to focus on. But what do I want to say? So this person, I feel like, is somebody that you knew from the original template, right? And perhaps you haven't really seen them since that would have split, right? So it's like you have that nostalgic past life kind of energy or connection or something with this individual, but there's memories in there that don't exactly belong to this situation with distorted mirror. Like there's things projected onto this that don't exactly belong to this. And what it's reminding me of with abandonment issues is that there's a memory that came up for me this week of when I was in kindergarten. And believe it or not, I was a talker and I didn't like to shut up ever. I just kept talking. So the teachers responded by putting me in the hallway. So I spent so much of my kindergarten time just sitting in the hallway away from the other students, blah, 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 blah. And I think it created like an abandonment issue kind of thing because it was so subtle that I really didn't remember it or dwell upon it for, the last 30 years up until this week. And but when I think about it, it's like, the humiliation and everything that comes out of it. But again, it's the subtlety, right? Because it's like there's never going to be a Dateline special about the time that I spent in the hallway, right? It's not that deep. But for a child, it is very deep, right? Because it otherized me and it gave other kids like the permission to kind of bully me and things like that. So, you know, not to make this about my tale of woe, but I feel like I'm throwing that out there because I feel like there is something so subtle that, again, there's no Dateline special about this thing that happened because it was so subtle, relatively trivial, but it was enough of a wound that it's like it activated whatever the bloodline trauma is that was here that doesn't exactly belong to you, right? But it's just it's in the mix, it's in your soup, and it feels like an echo of whatever this original timeline split would have been, right? Which would have come with a sense of abandonment or something like that. And what I mean by that, honestly, is that my personal belief about the world that we live in, the matrix that we live in, reality, whatever you want to call it, is that there was a period in time when things were really good here. I guess we were still connected to spirit or source or whatever you want to call it. And then something happened where this place got locked down effectively. And that experience was incredibly traumatizing because anybody that was left inside the matrix would have experienced separation for the first time ever, right? So if you happened to survive the cataclysm and you were still alive in the matrix when whatever happened, right? If we want to use Atlantis as the example, right? If you survived Atlantis, right, you experienced separation for the first time because you no longer had that direct connection to source the way that we did back in the day, or the telepathy, or whatever it was, right? It's like everybody and their mother, literally, trauma at the mother level, everybody was separated, right? And what I think we've been doing ever since then is healing that separation, right? Because the separation is the illusion. Maybe technically we were never really separated, but we just thought that we were. But it's like, it's almost like whoever or whatever this is, I feel like is something that you were separated from, but you're anticipating it coming back. And the reason why, because again, this is in the position of the goal, right? So I guess it would say that you're hoping that it's coming back, but I would also say anticipating because I do think that you've gotten a heads up on this. You've gotten some foreshadowing, right? That for whatever reason, you're 10 steps ahead of this thing. I know that that's been a big theme for the last month or two, maybe since the eclipse, in terms of getting the heads up on a lot of things before they actually show up. And again, with whatever needs to be negotiated with the timeline merger and the lovers, it's kind of it's saying that there's a concern, right? And I feel like, again, when I'm saying that, like, whatever it is that you're concerned about is not exactly attached to this person, it could be something along the lines of like the last time you saw that person, things were going poorly in general. So maybe you just associate them with that memory, if you get what I'm saying. But it didn't really have anything to do with them, right? It can almost be like I don't know. I can think of like friends that I haven't seen since college, right? When it's like that was like kind of a dark period, but I love them. I had a great time with them. But I do sometimes wonder if I keep that distance up because I'm afraid of reactivating whatever the scenario was that we were all in together, right? Something like that. But with the advice, Seven of Cups, this is talking to me about, again, playing Goldilocks. So that's what I was saying with the Fool energy and the Ace of Wands at the bottom of the deck, which also showed up in the Sagittarius reading, that this is all about playing Goldilocks and kind of following your nose wherever it goes. I've recorded this a few times, so I don't know if I've said this already, but I guess I'll say it again just to say it, that this has kind of been your process, right? It's just following whatever it is that lights you up. And you would have gravitated towards this person or this thing initially because it lit you up, right? But perhaps you wound up following that into something that was chaotic or whatever it may be. But again, it's like, was it exactly that thing or was it something around it, right? Because it's like maybe perhaps a lot of us with the abandonment issues and the distorted mirror, maybe in the last decade or so, a lot of us have played out that initial separation all over again, right? Because there's the Nine of Swords behind the Ace of Cups, right? Which is an energy of grief and regret and all of that. So I have to wonder, but the clarifier for the Seven of Cups is timeline map, right? Which talks to me about, trying to find your ideal timeline, your Goldilocks zone, your ecosystem. And this Seven of Cups reminds me of a video that I watched recently where a woman was talking about her particular timeline jumping process. And she would call it, I think she would say like reality one, reality two, reality three, reality four, where it's like if she wanted something to play out in particular, I feel like she was talking about a twin flame analogy or something like that. So I'm just going to use her story. But there was this guy that she was interested in. They'd separated for whatever reason. I think he was in some sort of circumstance, I don't know, that made it seem impossible, right? So she basically would just play out these different scenarios in her head, right? So reality one, she would play out a scenario where things are as they are. And then reality two, she would play out a scenario where the circumstances would change, but it still wouldn't be good. Or they would get together, but then the consequence of that would be something else bad would happen, right? So she would just keep jumping from timeline to timeline to timeline until she felt a reality where everything was correct, right? Everything lit up. It's like the relationship with this person was great, but then also all of these other things were good too, right? It didn't compromise her career or their career or anyone's family or anyone's, it was all peaches across the board, right? So that's what I'm feeling with the Seven of Cups, because Cups too are about belief systems, right? So it's like the mind really does have to accept the scenario that you're working with, right? Because whatever you're projecting onto the distorted mirror is, I feel like it's like slowing down this arrival, or it's blocking it in general, or blocking the merger of it. And the reason why is because you could be in a scenario of like, having one of those like old adages in your head of like nothing ever works out, or it's always something, or it's always drama, or it's you know what I'm saying, where it's like we just kind of like very subtly manifest against ourselves by saying these things that are problematic or whatever it may be. um, but with the Seven of Cups, I feel like it's really talking about those belief systems and the language and finding a scenario that when you think of that scenario, your body lights up. You don't feel resistance, right? You don't feel that icky feeling in your gut or anywhere in your body, right? Because that's often what I'll do when I'm thinking about different timelines and trying to jump. It's like I'll think of the scenario, and then if like I feel resistance in any part of my body, because I'm looking at the seven here, like the seven chakras. So like, and it's random, right? Like sometimes you'll feel it in your arm. You just feel like this weird, like nauseous feeling in your arm. That's the only way that I can describe it. But that that's a program. That's resistance, right? So examine that and try to pick that apart. But likewise, if you can find a scenario that doesn't have any resistance, that just kind of lights you up. So for me, it's like it's always one of my feet that lights up, and that's like how I know that things are working or whatever. Um, that could be the most ideal way to to pull something out of this, or what am I trying to say? That's to timeline jump, right? Because it's like you want to feel a scenario that doesn't have any resistance. So the best example I can use from my own life was that there was one time I was in a very hairy living situation, and I was in the process of, well, I guess one of my roommates was being evicted, right? It was something like that. And we were very concerned about how this person was going to respond. And based on this person's pattern of behavior, there was a common consensus response that was expected from everybody, right? So anytime this would come up in conversation, everybody would always project the same distorted mirror response onto the situation and say, oh, he's going to do X, Y, and Z. So I had to keep pushing back on that because I didn't want that to be rendered, right? I didn't want to co-sign on that particular timeline of reality and affirm it and say, oh yes, that is what will happen, because that's an affirmation, right? When you say that is what will happen, that's an affirmation, right? Or most likely X, Y, and Z, that's an affirmation. So anytime people would say that, I would push back and say, no, this person has a very unhealthy ego that does not want to be examined. And because of that, they will go out of their way to make sure that they are never put under the microscope, right? They might act all tough and puff up their feathers and talk some S behind the scenes or whatever. But when push comes to shove, they are going to bow out very quietly and disappear into the night, and we will never hear from them again. And that was exactly how it played out. Everybody was shocked, but me, because I kept saying, this is how it's going to play out. And, it's my reality, not yours. So I guess that's why it wins. So it's a scenario like that, right? Where it's like, if you hear the voice in your head saying like, oh no, it's this, and is it going to be that? And is it going to bring this? And is it going to bring so and so? And I guess pause and figure out whether or not any of those things are valid or connected to this person. But the other question would be, it's coming back to the Nine of Swords, right? Like the Nine of Swords behind all of this is the energy of the coulda, shoulda, woulda, where it's like we spend so much time worrying about what could potentially happen that we never actually take a moment to feel out the best case scenario, right? And actually visualize that. And that's what this is talking about. It's like, what is the best case scenario, right? It's like, not only do you want alignment and union with this person, place, or thing, but you most likely also want to maintain alignment with a bunch of other things, right? So it's like, I want an alignment and merger with this individual, but I also want to maintain this for my career and maintain that for my family, and we're not compromising here, and blah blah. And yeah, just taking the time to really kind of flush that out for yourself. So I'm gonna pull an extended, but first let me do an oracle card. Let's just pull a little oracle out of this. I want the first, here we go. And if you're interested in a private reading of your own, hit me up. All that info is in the description box. And we can do a Zoom, we can talk, and we can do the whole spiel. So what does this say? I am a creator. Everything around me began as thought. My clothes, my home, and even the roads that I drive on were once just thoughts. When I take the time to contemplate my surroundings, I grasp all the thoughts that took place to create the world. Likewise, my thoughts have created things. My thoughts create my actions and thereby create my life as I know it. Therefore, I strive and I strive to think about my desires optimistically. I'm a creator. That's perfect. I love these cards. They're so good. This is, what even is this? This is the I think it's just called the I Am Oracle deck. They're such beautiful messages, and they always, like, especially when I pull these out at events, and like 9 times out of 10, something on this card is an exact echo of whatever I just said in the reading. It's crazy. So today, it's all about how we manifest our reality and how we're creator beings and how we think things into existence. And it's basically saying that this is the same thing, right? Where it's like we have an opportunity to kind of, what do I want to say? I feel like it's about tuning into this original template energy and manifesting that it's like, uh, the memory that's coming into my head right now, take it as it resonates, is I've spoken to a bunch of exorcists about the energy of possession. And one common thing that comes up with the energy of possession is that once the person is cleared and they're healed and they come out of it, 9 times out of 10, they do not have memory of the situation. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's like when it comes to this distorted mirror and all of these things, and the elephant grandma, which talks about memory and trauma echoes that have to do with the memory, it's like I feel like there are memories that get blended together that don't belong to the right thing. I don't know how else to say that, but it's like I guess it's like the kindergarten scenario that I was talking about and being put out in the hallway, right? It's like that memory has blended into other moments in my life that have nothing to do with that experience, right? But it's like it's created a fear response to other things that again, abandonment issues, right? It's like something like that where other people are getting punished for things that they did not do, if that makes sense, right? Or I'm punishing myself proactively for things that have yet happened, right? I wind up putting myself out in the hallway, right? So that could be an aspect of what's here with this Three of Wands, right? Is that it's like the goal or the hope is that something will return, but look how high up he is on the cliff here. It's like he can't really meet this ship if it arrives on the shore, right? He's still going to be quite far removed from it because it's like it's almost giving me the sense of co-creating the distance, maybe that you and this thing have co-created the distance. But what else I feel like I want to say one more thing about that. Let me just go one more oracle card. It says, I express myself fully as an act of self-love. Okay, so this would talk about kind of like limiting the expression of your manifestation. That makes sense, right? It's like sometimes, because with the Seven of Cups, it's like the borderline between dreams and delusions, where it's like you don't want to get too hopeful because you don't want to disappoint yourself. So therefore, you start resisting things that feel hopeful because you associate hope with disappointment and you associate risk with disappointment, I guess, right? Um, Something there that again, I am a creator. It's like, where are those thoughts in the soup? Right? In the bottom sentence, it says, I strive and I strive to think about my desires optimistically. Right? So, in terms of this timeline merger, are you thinking about it optimistically or pessimistically? Are you expecting it to be a divine union that you can celebrate, whatever it may be, harmonious alignment, yada yada? Or are you expecting some sort of conflict to come from it inevitably, even if it's not with this individual, right? It's like, do you just associate them with the hard times that they themselves did not create or contribute to, but were just present for? That's my question. So I'm going to pull an extended. We're going to look at what's next and why. And you know what? Let's do an extended preview. I'm going to pull a full Celtic cross, so that's going to be 10 cards, but the first two are what's next and why. So let's look at it. We got what's next? The Ace of Pentacles. Yes. Okay. So that's good. And why? The Hanged Man. Oh, interesting. Especially this Hanged Man, right? Because it's like he's holding his own little thread. That's so funny. What's next and why? So the Ace of Pentacles talks to me about a really solid timeline, right? This is my 30-year mortgage card. This is like the paperwork has been signed. Oop, I lost my focus. Okay, well, whatever. But it's stable. It's not just an Ace of Wands where it's an intangible idea or a concept like an Ace of Cups, Ace of Swords. It's the real deal. It's physical. It's there. And with the Hanged Man, it's like, this is what's next. This is why it's there. So that's interesting, right? Because it's like painting yourself into a corner that forces this situation. Is that the best way to say it? Because it's reminding me of this Fool energy here, where it's like your process is just allowing yourself to be lit up, right? Or, excuse me, following things that light you up, right? That's your process. So that's why you would ever move towards this thing in the first place. And I'm so frustrated that the focus is not focusing. Come on here, y'all. Whatever. But with this Hanged Man card, I feel like the focus has something to do with it, right? Where it's like the thing has gone out of focus because you've put your focus somewhere else, right? Because this Three of Wands in the background here, right? It's about things in the distance versus things close up. So it's like maybe when things are in the distance, you can be very hopeful about it. It's easy to be hopeful about it. But then as it starts to become more and more real, that's when the agita kicks in. Because now it's like you actually have to play ball with whatever this manifestation is, right? And then the Seven of Cups, the boundary between dreams and delusion, you start asking whether or not you're even qualified to handle whatever this is, right? But what's coming in and why, the Hanged Man, it's like, quite frankly, it's like creating this alignment out of almost like maybe what you thought were foolish mistakes, right? With the Fool energy, because oh, there we go, finally, some clarity. Um, because again, it's like with the Three of Wands, it's like you've gotten yourself to this higher perspective where you can see things coming in, right? Because I do feel like you have advanced notice that this thing is returning. You know that, right? And that has to do with having really sharp intuition and having worked yourself into a position where you have a field advantage, right? But it's because of the choices that you've made that you might qualify as mistakes with the Hanged Man, right? That it's like all of that has kind of aligned to put you in this ideal position to receive this Ace of Pentacles, something like that, right? So it's a perspective shift, absolutely. But in the same respect, it's like thinking about the divine timing of whatever this is returning, right? That it's like there's a reason why it didn't happen when it happened, right? I think about that a lot with my own particular story where there's like, things that I wish had happened years ago or whatever, especially with different jobs and apartments. And as I moved, hoping, or thinking that I had really lost out on an opportunity. And then I look back in hindsight and I think, oh, darn, if I had landed that job or if I got that apartment in that city, I would have never wound up here. I would have never met so and so. I would have never done this. And I would have never evolved. And then it's like when those opportunities do come back, it's like I'm so much more advanced that sometimes I'm beyond the opportunity and I don't need it anymore. But sometimes it's like I can walk into it now like a master, right? Something like that. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to jump into the extended. Thank you, Collective, for tuning into this, and I'll see you guys there. Bye.